Hello, everybody. It's Ezio 117 here, and this year was the absolute worst. When it came to the world around us, of course. The music, however, has been really good this year, and given that we all had to be in lockdown, that gave us music listeners like myself more time to explore new music compared to usual. And today, just like the last 2 years before, I will be doing a list of my top 10 albums of 2020. As usual, this is all my personal opinion, so if you don't agree with my list, please don't make a big deal about it, please. Thanks. Now, before I start my list, I should get my honorable mentions out of the way. As while all of them were really good, they weren't good enough to end up in my top 10 list, sadly. What you mean? And without further ado, let's get on with our 10th spot. Well, this came as a shock to me. What's Your Pleasure by UK R&B artist Jessie Ware is not only a glorious love letter to all things disco, pop, and house music, but it is also just a great album in general. The hooks, production, vocals, and pacing throughout this is just remarkable. And while other disco albums from this year like Kylie Minogue's Disco, Royce and Murphy's Royce and Machine, and Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia all had their highlights, they haven't had the lasting impact What's Your Pleasure has had on me in comparison. So if you are a disco or pop fan and you haven't heard this, stop what you are doing right now and check this out. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. This year has had quite a few unique black metal releases, like for example Isaac Trillium's wonderful Eternity of Shaug, Wagner Ödegård's Om Kosmos och de 12 Hjärtecken, and Serpent Column's Endless Detainment EP. But the one that stood out to me the most out of all of them was the album from Finnish black metal legends Oranssi Pazuzu called Mester and Kinsey. The band has made a name for themselves with their unique blend of psychedelic rock and black metal, and with this new album they refine their sound even further by adding in influences all ranging from genres like industrial to post-minimalism, and hell even breakbeat a la The Prodigy on one track. And despite more influences being added to their sound, the band hasn't sounded any tighter than they do here. Every track is dense, engaging, unpredictable, and most importantly, fun as hell, with the band's sense of rhythm helping to contribute to that. While not the best black metal album of the year for me personally, I would still highly recommend this as it really is that good. Easily my pick for black metal album of the year, the French black metal artist Paysage de Verre has been continuously putting out excellent black metal album after another over the years, and this may be his shining achievement to date. Taking the lo-fi black metal sound he is known for and making it slightly more melodious and polished, if you will, he has created a sprawling 2-hour-long opus that features symphonic wall of sound as guitars, beautiful synth work, chilling vocals and drum work, and his usual wonderful wintry atmosphere. And while it is definitely repetitive throughout, Paysage has a way of making said repetition hypnotic and addictive, and therefore making the album a breeze to sit through. This album may not be for everyone, especially for those who are impatient with their music, but for those who dig atmosphere and repetition are in for a treat. And for me personally, I am most certainly satisfied. What is that, you say? A French take on Titanic Rising? Count me in! Okay, I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, since I'm not sure if Chloe is even familiar with Wise Blood. This album sure feels like a spiritual successor to that 2019 classic, which was also my album of the year, by the way. This album's combination of Baroque pop, synth pop, and art pop / prog pop is tastefully done, and Chloe's vocals are simply irresistible throughout. And just like Titanic Rising, I feel like one of this album's biggest strengths comes from how it takes a genre that would seem rather dated nowadays, in this case 60s inspired Baroque pop, and makes it sound timeless. The album highlights Remora exemplifies this best in my opinion. Not sure if this is really her best work though, since her previous album is equally fantastic, but this is still a must listen regardless. DJ Sabrina the Teenage DJ is a recent discovery of mine, and while I have heard the name before in the past, I didn't check her out until much later, mostly because of her ridiculous name and the rather interesting album covers that she has. I did eventually get around to checking out her breakthrough album, Making Magic, just this year, and I thought it was a super enjoyable, if rather long-winded album. It was then to my shock to see her new album, Charmed, be twice as long in length. And honestly, after listening to it, I found this album to go by way faster than I would have hoped for, especially in comparison to Making Magic. This album doesn't have the unique lo-fi deep house sound the former has, but it makes up for it for just being so entertaining, wonderfully produced, catchy, and simply put, charming throughout. Despite me not being the biggest fan of house music, I'm surprised I dug this as much as I did. This album comes highly recommended for me, especially if you are an electronic or house music fan. Ichiko Aoba has been a very notable name amongst internet music circles for a good long while now, since the release of her absolutely fantastic album Zero back in 2013. And while this new album of hers isn't quite as magical as that aforementioned album, it's still another excellent addition to Ichiko's already very consistent catalog. It shows her going into more of a chamber folk sound, which she has only explored prior on live album Numa back in 2017. This is her first studio album to utilize chamber instrumentation though, and it manages to not come off as an annoyance or a gimmick. If anything, it feels like a natural extension of her already established sound. So there's lots of wonderful instrumentation and arrangements throughout, specifically on album highlights Pilgrimage and Dawn in the Aiden, which both showcase her new sound and how well she goes along with it. So there is no doubt in my mind that Ichiko Uba is one of the greatest artists of our time, and this album is no exception. This comes highly recommended for me. Bittersweet summer rain. Neo-soul is a genre I wish I loved more than I do. I mean, keep in mind, soul music on its own is fantastic, especially the classics like Nina Simone, Stevie Wonder, Curtis Mayfield, so on and so forth, but I feel like neo-soul fails to capture what made these older artists so great, in my opinion. In the end, it just feels like a slightly less immature and dull cousin to contemporary R&B, a genre which most times fails to resonate with me. This is where Lianne La Havas comes into the picture. She basically takes what made artists like Aretha Franklin or Nina Simone so special to begin with and updates it into modern times. If anything, she reminds me of Lauryn Hill, just minus the rapping, of course. Leanne's vibrato-filled vocals will not appeal to everyone, but to me, it comes up as a wonderful artistic choice and helps add to the emotion of these songs. She even managed to do a wonderful cover of Radiohead's classic Weird Fishes, which might I add is even better than the original in my opinion, which is saying a lot because the original was already great. All in all, this is a wonderfully tuneful and memorable release which will for sure stand the test of time and be considered a classic in the genre. Talk about a unique act. New York-based avant-garde metalers Imperial Triumphant has made themselves known for their melding of avant-garde jazz and technical black and death metal. Like think Charles Mingus meets Artificial Brain in a way. That's basically Imperial Triumphant in a nutshell. With this new album, just like Oranzi Pazuzu that I mentioned earlier, they refined their sound even further. Like an album highlights Atomic Age and Transmissions from Mercury, for example, where the former starts out with a barbershop quartet which eases you in before slamming you with dissonant riffage, while the latter starts with a pretty classically influenced piano intro. There are also choirs, African percussion, straight up hard bop rhythms, and more to be found within. This year has proven to be excellent when it comes to avant-garde metal music, and this is no exception. Please check this out if you haven't already. It is one hell of a treat.
Something in this room didn't used to be. Gin bottle to the face, can't fool the G.
Los Angeles-based trio Clipping are a group I have very mixed feelings on, to be honest. They have a unique sound by blending harsh noise with West Coast inspired rap, and Davi Diggs is a talented dude for sure, but more often than not, for every great track they make, like Story 2, they do something very gimmicky and annoying like the entirety of Mid-City or The Show. With this new album, however, they finally found their stride. This is a sequel to their album from last year, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, and not only does it massively improve on that album, but this is easily their best work to date. Taking the horrorcore they established on that aforementioned album and adding in elements of cloud rap, breakcore, electroacoustic improv, ritual ambient, and more into the mix, they refined their songwriting and rapping along the way as well. So if you're sick and tired of constantly jamming your old 666 records and want something like them but modernized, I would just say listen to Lil Ugly Mane, but it wouldn't hurt if you checked out this album as well. Alright, this is what you all have been waiting for, the number one pick, the album that has impacted me the most this year, as well as an album I can see holding up wonderfully over time and I will be cherishing for the rest of my life. And now, my pick for album of the year goes to Charles. I ain't never seen a bitch I need. Fuck that. Gotcha. Okay, for real now. Here is my number one pick. This album, man. I knew from first listen that nothing else was going to top it. Coming off two solid, if rather flawed albums with Vermis and Shrines of Paralysis, this feels like a breath of fresh air for them. It's still an ulcerate album at its core. Angular dissonant guitars, coked up drumming, heavy growls, and so on and so forth, but they add more melody this time around into the mix and tighter production. Just something about the atmosphere, man, that this band creates just gets me in the zone. And even though the album doesn't vary much throughout, hell, all the songs are practically in the same key, the band has enough intricate, soaring guitar lines and fun drum fills to make it fly by very fast. It's 58 minutes of some of the most engaging, beautiful, and harrowing tech death this side of modern day gore guts. If you're an extreme metal fan, or hell, just metal fan in general, and you haven't heard this, I would just say to you right now, pause this video and do it. It is completely worth it. So yeah, guys, that was my list of the top 10 albums of 2020 in my humble opinion. I hope you people out there are safe and taking proper precautions because you don't want to celebrate New Year's with COVID, you know? Anyway, thanks so much, guys, for watching this video. And if you haven't already, please like it, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, yada yada. Blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. And I wish you guys a happy new year. Hopefully next year will be a big improvement for us. I think.